Well, so I've got to say, what caught my attention about your book, we have your title, Feeling Forwards, but how to become the person who has the life you want. Nowadays, I feel like we spend a whole lot of time comparing ourselves to other people and saying, I wish I were her. I wish I had that from him. I wish I had that person's money. Talk a little bit about how you got to this book, because I know this is all part of your journey.
Yes, I mean, it's so interesting when you talk about comparing ourselves to others because we do forget to look for our own magic. And ironically, I really stumbled across the power of emotions and why it's been almost treated as the second class citizen to thinking when I wrote my two previous books about very much I was looking at mindset in difficult circumstances, which was surviving cancer and surviving childhood, the challenges that children have. But emotions were really something to be seen as not as important as thinking. But if we could think our way to happiness and success, we would keep every New Year's resolution, we would carry out every good intention. And I discovered that emotions really are the secret sauce to get where we want to go. And that's when feeling forwards really came into fruition.
So, talk a little bit about that when you say emotions. What does that mean? If somebody gets up in the morning and they're unhappy or they're frustrated or they just feel overwhelmed, where do you start to harness the right emotions?
That's a great question. And I do it, there's lots of examples of the book, but it really starts with noticing what you notice. And I love that you've mentioned getting up in the morning because really creating the power of the emotions for the next day actually starts the night before. And I was very excited to be able to share this with an anchor woman as prestigious as yourself. But what I suggest for harnessing the power of emotions before you go to bed, for example, is to play a highlight reel in your head of everything you did get done. We've become so caught up, and particularly at the moment with the relentless grind of to-do lists and having to pivot and compromise, we often forget to notice what we did get done and what we did get done, those small things, the word we kept to ourselves, the kind gesture that no one else will never know about, following through when we really didn't like it. If you can create the habit of that highlight reel in your mind before you go to sleep, you actually set your day up emotionally so much better for the next day.
Well, it's so true because sometimes we're playing in, we're saying like I got to do this tomorrow, I got to do that tomorrow, I've got to get this. I know last night, as a matter of fact, I was up thinking about all the things I needed to do starting early in the morning. So it's not always easy, but you're right. If you're thinking about those things, maybe it empowers you to do what is coming and what is coming up next, really, in your life. Let's talk about this. The title of the book is Feeling Forwards. What does that mean? Can you define it, and how would you incorporate feeling forwards?
Yes, well, I'd love to give you an example I think is really in alignment with all the pivoting we have to do at the moment. And someone reached out to me that was about to go for a job interview that they were feeling very nervous about because it was in a different area from which they were used to working. And we talked it through, and I said, how about we use feeling forwards to create this for you? So I said, how will you feel when you get this job? She responded she would feel amazing, she would confident. I said, well, let's channel those feelings. How about you go to the interview and feel as though you already have the job, and then how will the interview run from there? And she said, well, I won't feel as nervous because these are colleagues, not people who are set to critique my experience, and I'll be excited about the contribution I'm going to make. So we played around with it and we used some techniques in the book. And then I caught up with her afterwards and she said, look, it was a completely different experience because, firstly, I wasn't nervous going into the interview, but secondly, they asked me what I would be doing in the next 3 months, who my competitors were, what ideas I had for the company to remain a market leader. And she said, well, because I'd already felt forwards that I was there, I was able to answer all of those questions. And she, in effect, like the tagline for the book, became the person who already had the job.
It's just a great concept. We do it oftentimes when we are so maybe we're leaving a job, or it's at the end of a project or whatever, and we have this unbelievable confidence in ourselves, and we think to ourselves, wow, I wish I had that going into it this entire time. There's a bit of a freedom in that kind of emotion, I would assume.
Absolutely. And I think what is exciting about the idea of feeling forwards, and there's so many real life stories in there, but you can apply it straight away. And it's really being free from circumstances. And just to share another example, I had a book review recently from a mummy's blog, and she shared the ideas of feeling forwards with her whole family. And she said it was quite incredible because her little boy grasped the principles and said, well, do you mean I can feel confident without waiting for something to happen? And she said,
Wow.
yeah, you can. And he went to school, and she said it actually changed the relationship with his friends because he stopped being bullied because he was already confident without waiting for the situation to change.
That's remarkable from the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah.
Tony Robbins gave you some confidence, or at least some confident words. How did you come about knowing him, and how did he come about getting your book in his hands?
Well, Tony and I actually go back over 10 years when I sent him my first book, and he very kindly wrote me a letter and said some really lovely things. And I reached out a little while later and said, look, is it okay if I use the quote from the letter for this book? And he said, oh, look, we need to catch up. So I had a private meeting in Sydney. He flew me to, I went to another couple of events at his guest. And when I
Wow.
said, look, can I use this marketing material previously for this book? He said, no, 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 I want to do something special for this book. And he gave me this quote. He's been extraordinarily generous.
That is remarkable, and congratulations to you for that, because those are gems that he must be seeing and putting to use. Well, let's talk about this. We have a lot of people that talk about wanting to pivot and their next chapter and trying to figure things out, and we use these words over and over and over again. But how do you really get out of a rut, or do you have good advice for somebody that's trying to get out of a rut and move into a new venture? Because that is not as easy as, we write it down and we say it, but to execute that is not always easy. Do you have some good advice for people out there trying to do that?
Yes, look, that can be very challenging, and I never like to minimize those challenges, but provide a tool that you can use to overcome them. And I think if you take any day, even your day today, or you're at the beginning of your day, Tams, and I'm at my end, but at any day, you can actually have two different versions of the same day. You could
Mm,
notice everything that went wrong, everything that you did that you weren't proud of, every time someone let you down, or during the same day, you can notice everything that you were proud of, that did work, that did make you feel great about one part of that day. And you can choose your emotions in the same way you can choose your thoughts. So in any trying circumstance, I mean, I know when I look back, for example, on my cancer journey, I can think of some really horrendous times, but I can also choose to look back and think of all the lovely people I used to meet in theatre every time. And I used to see how many people I could say hello to before I went under because I got to know them really well. So
right.
it's really choosing what you focus on and using that as a discipline. And then you can harness the emotions you need. I mean, look at all those skinny boys and girls that dreamed of being a great athlete who weren't the tallest or the strongest or the
Right.
fastest, but they found that ability to believe in themselves, and that's the essence of feeling forwards.
And what was that journey that had you believe in yourself?
Oh, look, I had a really kind of rough run with a number of events that included being in a fatal car accident, having cancer, having a very violent home invasion, losing my marriage, losing my house, and then eventually I had to stop working because I was so unwell. And along the way through, and I explore this completely in my book, I just had the feeling there was a future out there that wasn't visible at the moment, but if I kept moving towards it, I could make it happen. And I was fortunate enough to do that. And it gives me the most enormous joy to hear stories like that little boy who's not being bullied anymore, because our emotions are the secret sauce. They're much more powerful than we believe. I love your beautiful expression, unlock your bold.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, how do you do that? How do you unlock your bolt?
Well, it's not by thinking about it. It's about feeling it and thinking, okay, if I'm feeling like who's going to be bold, what would I be doing? Would I be sitting around waiting for something to happen? Or would I be looking for something to happen? Would I be taking one step forward, or would I be stressing about making a change? it's becoming the person. I love Cary Grant, who was the most gorgeous debonair movie star, was born in a very impoverished family with huge disadvantages. And he changed his name and he said, I pretended to be Cary Grant until I became him, or he became me.
Wow, that is so true. I remember that quote. That is great, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think nowadays, we have this. We talk about it being a fear of missing out, but we're also comparing ourselves endlessly. We scroll and we look and I catch myself doing it even when I know it's not the right thing to do, because I just think it's innate in us to do that, right? To see something
Mm.
in somebody else that you want to emulate or you want to strive toward. But there's a very fine line between doing that and actually getting so wrapped up in it that you paralyze yourself, correct?
Absolutely. And I have a technique that I love. There's a mental picture I love to pop in people's heads, which is the image of an athlete, particularly a 100-meter sprint, which is, short and sharp and furious. And I say, have you ever seen a 100-meter sprint where one runner ran the whole race looking at the runner next to them? And
Wow.
no, I say, well, why are you running your life like that? You're not going to, I mean, if you did do a race that way, you'd either fall over or you'd never finish. You certainly wouldn't achieve your best. So we spend so much time turning our head to look at the other person where really we're pretty fabulous all by ourselves.
Yeah, what an absolutely great analogy. It really is. You just tumble all over yourself and you'd be stopped right in your path. Where I guess my next question is where did you become a reinvention coach, and how did you decide that that was the path that you were going to take, and did you have any reservations about that?
No reservations, no. I mean, I was fairly unusual in as much I'd already reinvented myself through my career 6 or 7 times before I started writing, although writing had always been a secret passion. And what I loved about the whole journey of reinvention is it means that you get to grow all the time and you don't get stuck. And that you mentioned earlier, it's so easy to get stuck in what we're doing, either stuck in what we think we should be doing or other people's opinions of us or comparison. So the reinvention is not changing yourself. I'm not fond of that expression, your future self, because you are yourself now and in the future. You have the same attributes. But I think if you're not growing, you are standing still. And then the challenge is you're going backwards. And that's not a happy place to be.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. And I think nowadays I hear more and more people talk about reinvention, whether it was a pandemic that started it or simply the fact that, we've moved into an area where we're living another, 10, 20 plus years and needing a second chapter in our lives. Are you seeing more people that are going into the middle age and figuring out how to reinvent after having a number of years of a career?
Absolutely. And also women reinventing themselves, coming through that stage where they had a pretty good idea of their career, they had a pretty good idea of their family, but life has a habit of knocking you sideways sometimes. And then it's like, oh my goodness, well, I thought my life was going to end up like this and it's not looking like it's going to be that way. Well, how do I find the strength to pivot and then not only be able to move forward, but celebrate that? And that requires a certain pattern of really creating the future you want to enjoy rather than being stuck in the circumstances that have happened to you.
I know that you on your website have top questions that will lead to your best future, and there are certain questions that you ask yourself every day. What are some of those questions to help people along?
The first one is, what is the most important thing I can do for my future today? And that really sorts out the mundane from the strategic, because it's really easy to get caught up in the low hanging fruit of checking the emails or returning a phone call. But what is actually your contribution going to be? One of the other most important ones for me is, who can I lift up today? And that's the 15 minutes where I think of someone. It could be a friend, it could be a stranger, it could be a family member, it could be someone who's done a great post on LinkedIn that I'll probably never meet, but it's just like, that was really amazing. And I find that keeps me really grounded, but also very focused on contribution. And then I also pick a word for the day. And sometimes, we all have hard days. Sometimes it's persistence or
Right.
consistency. And sometimes it's creativity and sometimes it's rest. And that really helps.
I think it does too. I was out on Sunday. I was resting a lot, and I said I feel so guilty about this. And a friend of mine said, "You're not resting though if you're feeling guilty about it. So it's just you're not doing anything. You're just kind of negating itself." And I said, "That's a good thought." Well, you do a lot of things. I know you've also or worked with the Zuckerberg Institute as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, well, I met Randy at a conference, and she ended up inviting me to be a founding member of Zuckerberg Institute, and I was fortunate enough to do some coaching with her leadership team, and we focused very much on entrepreneurs, very much on helping people get unstuck. And we were in Sweden in middle of 2019 running a hackathon, which was so much fun. But of course, I haven't been able to get to New York for a little while, and Zuckerberg have pivoted and doing some really, really incredible programs with high school and college students now. But it was really exciting to work along Randy, who is a powerhouse and a very clever and also warm woman, and she was really inspirational in the insight she was able to bring into really cutting through that entrepreneur journey.
Yeah, she really is brilliant. If there is one thing you think that gets people stuck and unable to get unstuck, what would that be?
I think it's thinking that you are what happens to you, not you are the person who chooses to respond what happens to you. Abraham Lincoln said the best way to predict your future is to design it. And it is possible just by noticing what you notice, deciding on the future you want to have rather than waiting for it to happen, I think is really one of the secrets of people who really get to where they want to go compared with the people that sadly stay stuck.